hit that record button. Beautiful. Good morning. Thank you all for joining us today. I want to let you know, as you just heard, this coffee hour is being recorded. So anyone who wants to review what we've covered, we will send that recording out in a day or two. You can find this and all of our coffee hours, along with the recordings of our workshops, certification help, newsletter previews, and a great deal more on our YouTube channel. You can either search YouTube for Sustainable CT and you'll find us there, but we'll also put a link in the chat, Torrin, if you don't mind popping that link in the chat. While you're there, be sure to check out this month's episode of The Impact, which is our Sustainable CT podcast. New episodes are available on the 15th of each month on YouTube at sustainablecT.org or wherever you get your podcasts. And just out today, we have a fun and informative conversation with one of our new members of our board of directors, Adrian Huck. And some of you may know Adrian as they were a Sustainable CT Fellow for 4 summers. They worked with both NVCOG and CROG. Adrian's currently a grad student at the Yale School of the Environment. And for several years, they've been working with a host of environmental groups, and they've done just so many different environmental initiatives across the state. They're a fascinating person, and I really encourage you to check out that podcast. Speaking of the fellowship, we do want to let you know we are accepting applications until February 9th at 5 p.m. This is a paid fellowship position. And we want to get the word out far and wide. So if you know any college students, please share the link that we'll put in the chat with them. We place highly qualified college students across the state's councils of governments to help cities and towns become registered, certified, and recertified with our program. So again, please do share that link far and wide. We want to get a broad applicant pool and pick the next cohort of Sustainable CT Fellows. So now let's get to our coffee hour today. We're really excited to be joined by representatives from Energia and the town of Cheshire, who are going to share with us how your town can save money, reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and more through energy savings performance contracting. The work performed and results from these types of projects might help your town earn points in our energy actions as well, including those in our Climate Leader Designation. I just want to remind folks that we are offering a Climate Leader Prize to Climate Leader designees last year, in 2026, and in 2027. So towns that earn this designation will be able to split $100,000 each year amongst the designees for projects that reduce a town's greenhouse gas emissions. In 2025, we had 8 climate leaders: East Haddam, Hamden, Manchester, Mansfield, Middletown, Norwalk, Pomfret, and Vernon, and they're each receiving $12,500 for projects. So really exciting. I want to turn it over now to Justin Benoit, the Director of Project Delivery at Energia, who's going to introduce himself very quickly.
Perfect. Thank you, Jess. And good morning, everyone. As Jeff mentioned, my name is Justin Benoit, and I'm the Director of Project Delivery at Energia. To tell you a little bit about who we are at Energia, we are an energy engineering design and consulting firm, and we specialize in providing energy efficient solutions to school districts and municipalities. Specifically, we've served as the owner's representative for municipalities on energy savings performance contract projects for nearly 20 years. Through that time, we've been involved in over 150 successful energy-focused projects with construction costs exceeding $1 billion. And our services and our role really extends throughout the entire process, from initial evaluation, opportunity assessment, through design, construction, and performance verification. So again, really happy to be here this morning to share some insight as to how energy savings performance contracting may be a tool that can help your municipality combat some of these rising utility costs that we're seeing. With that, I'll pass it over to my co-presenter to introduce himself.
Thank you, Justin. Good morning, everyone. I'm happy to be here. My name is Vincent Masciana. I'm currently the Chief Project Officer for the Cheshire Public Schools. It's a relatively new role for me, and it's a pre-retirement role. Prior to being Chief Project Officer, I've been here in Cheshire for 15 plus years as the Chief Operating Officer, responsible for, a number of different departments, including facilities, the budget, school transportation, food service, and a number of other things. The reason I'm here today is because Cheshire, back in 2014, did do an energy performance contract. Energia did serve as our owner's rep at the time. We are currently working on our second one, which you'll hear a little bit more later when I give an update on our first project. So with that, I'll turn it back over to you, Justin.
Perfect. And I can share my screen here. We can jump in. So just to add to that a little bit, especially today, speaking about, energy savings performance contracting as a tool to help you combat some of these rising utility costs. I think it's no secret, probably for everyone on the call, that energy costs are on the rise. Connecticut in particular is already one of the more expensive or most expensive states when it comes to energy, and in particular electricity costs. And so energy savings performance contracting can be a tool to help you really fight against that and maintain healthy budgets. And really the way that it does that, and I'll get into this a little bit more in the presentation, but this is a budget neutral initiative here, and it lets towns and school districts really fund major energy infrastructure upgrades without any upfront costs or new taxes. And those initiatives, those upgrades are focused on driving energy savings, which again helps to offset these rising utility costs. And so throughout the presentation, I'll get into how ESPCs work. We'll share a proven process for success and show how the future energy savings that are generated from these projects can free up funds for other priorities. Again, Vin's experience and his knowledge is valuable here as well. He'll certainly get into some kind of real world perspectives about how kind of this process can be managed, how it can extend beyond the buildings and extend beyond energy to really drive additional benefits to towns and communities as well. So with that, let's start by speaking a little bit more about kind of the state of energy today. And so as I mentioned, energy costs across Connecticut and across the country continue to rise. And of course, that puts increased pressure on municipal budgets. Just in early this year, although we've already seen and experienced rate increases over the past 12 months, it's expected that rates are going to increase by 15% in early 2026. Again, notwithstanding the fact that Connecticut is already one of the more expensive states when it comes to energy. Looking into the future, energy experts only expect these rate increases to continue rather than to stabilize. And so even as you project further out into the future, this is going to become more and more of a concern and more of a challenge that municipalities are going to have to address. I think with that, one thing to note is that many municipal buildings are not operating as efficiently as they could be. And so the US EPA and Department of Energy estimate that roughly 1/3 of the energy use in buildings is attributed to waste. Of course, there's operational challenges that factor in, like deferred maintenance, for example, that can compound these inefficiencies, which then lead to higher energy use, higher long-term costs. And of course, again, that makes it difficult for municipalities to plan, budget, and manage energy expenses. So what are your options here? Certainly one option is a capital project where you go to the school board and the community with a request for funding. But today here, we want to talk about another option, a budget neutral approach, which is energy savings performance contracting, or ESPC. And so ESPCs offer a way to transform aging buildings without any capital request. And how does that work? Essentially, these projects allow you to upgrade your facilities without any upfront costs. And so instead, the costs are covered over time using energy savings that are generated from reduced energy bills. And so again, these projects are focused on improving the facilities, of course, but also driving energy savings, which in turn allows you to leverage those energy savings as the funding source for the project itself. And so through this, it can be a budget-friendly approach and a sustainable solution, again, because you're not requiring any upfront cost and you're able to make those improvements that you need today. So in terms of what makes ESPCs unique, again, they allow municipalities to address critical infrastructure needs while also at the same time reducing energy and operating costs. And so these projects, of course, improve how buildings perform day to day. And there's certainly an emphasis on improved comfort, reliability, and overall building health. And again, I think one of the most important differences is that ESPCs do not require new taxes or budget increases. Again, the funding source for these projects is the energy savings that are generated from the project itself. And so with that, I think there's something important here to note, which is that those energy savings are guaranteed. And that's really why they're able to be leveraged as the funding source for the project. And so I'll talk a little bit more about the process and kind of methodology for the guarantee of savings. But when done correctly, the guarantee provides protection to the owner and gives you the confidence that those energy savings will come to fruition and that you are not the one at risk if there were any shortfall or if the energy savings didn't come to fruition, again, because there's a guarantee tied to that funding source. And so in addition, there is no voter approval for these projects. It's a little bit unique in that the contractor that's responsible for implementing the improvements and guaranteeing the savings really is the one that drives the construction process. And so it can create a little bit less burden for municipalities as well in terms of not having to manage subcontractors. And again, having kind of a fixed price opportunity to implement those improvements. With all of that being said, I think it goes without saying that this is certainly unique and maybe new to a lot of municipalities and districts, and certainly requires a different approach and a different set of experts compared to traditional capital project. And so if I can leave you with anything today, I would certainly note that it's critical that you engage professionals whose role is to protect the municipality's interests throughout the process, from evaluation all the way through implementation, and again into the verification phase in terms of savings. So here I have a chart that I think kind of gives a good overview of how ESPCs work. So firstly, starting on the left-hand column there, you have your current energy budget. So this is what you are paying for your utilities today. This is what you would continue to pay for the foreseeable future, of course, notwithstanding any rate increases that are certainly down the road. Through an energy performance contract, again, we're able to target energy efficient improvements and capital upgrades to drive energy savings. And so that's kind of what that middle column there represents. You could see the new energy budget has a reduction from the current energy budget. Now, with those savings, you're able to firstly make your debt service payments. Again, that's how the energy savings serve as the funding source. We're reducing the energy budget and allowing you to leverage those savings and allocate them towards your debt service payments. Now, beyond that, we have that cash flow bar at the top. Really, that represents any excess energy savings, any state rebates or federal rebates, incentives, grants that are all applicable to these projects. But after that debt service payment is satisfied, anything extra comes back to the municipality in the form of positive cash flow that you can use as you see fit. And then finally, after the EPC, that column there on the right-hand side represents after the debt service payments are completely satisfied. So you paid off the financing for the project. What you're left with is that same equipment that's high efficient, improving your operational systems, and a new energy budget, right? That's reduced again from what the pre-EPC budget was. Now, because you don't have any debt service payments at this point, all of those energy savings, all of those operational savings are coming back to your bottom line and purely going back in the form of positive cash flow. So again, I think that kind of gives a little bit of an overview, but maybe to put some numbers to an example, I'll use a little bit smaller round numbers here, but assuming that your current energy budget is $100,000 a year, again, that would continue to increase over time, but continue to be money that you're giving to the utility company ultimately to manage your facilities and continue to operate your facilities. Now, through these projects, we typically see about a 30% reduction, which again is in line with the EPA's designation that there's about a third of energy use that's being wasted. And so with that, you would expect that that new energy budget would be $70,000, right? That $30,000 in energy savings. And so with those savings, again, a portion of that would go towards satisfying the debt service payment. Any extra, including any additional rebates, incentives, grants, would come back to you in the form of positive cash flow. And then finally, again, after the EPC, you have your new energy budget still maintaining at $70,000 with the positive cash flow now coming directly back to you because there's no longer that debt service payment that needs to be satisfied through those savings. And so just to kind of wrap here on this slide, I think despite rising energy costs, replacing energy efficient equipment is a way to significantly reduce your utility expenditures. Again, that allows you to make your debt service payback and even generate positive cash flow. And so an ESPC can help stabilize your budget by eliminating that waste and then certainly driving a positive savings and a positive cash flow. So, certainly the sooner that you're able to implement a project like this, the sooner that you're able to, one, drive energy savings, but again, kind of offset or hedge against the rising utility costs that we know are coming. Here, outline a couple of additional advantages of ESPCs over traditional capital projects. I think a few just to note, again, these projects, being that they're focused on energy, being that they're focused on improving efficiency and operational capacities within buildings, really accomplish a goal of reducing not only your long-term energy use, but also your maintenance costs to fund needed capital improvements, again, without having an impact to the taxpayers. It also is a great way to ensure uniformity and equity in terms of building temperatures, lighting levels, which for one can reduce complaints from students and staff, but also from the community, ensuring that you're taking a comprehensive approach to fund needed improvements. Again, the guaranteed savings and performance that exist within this process is certainly unlike a traditional capital project. There are monetary guarantees associated with the savings and guarantees associated with long-term performance and efficiency levels of the equipment that would be installed as part of the project. Certainly, it's a tested and proven concept. As I mentioned, Energia ourselves have been involved in over 150 projects. And then beyond the financial piece as well, I'll just note that there is certainly an environmental benefit, and it's something that we regularly quantify for municipalities and for their communities in terms of carbon reductions and greenhouse gas reductions that we're able to achieve as part of, again, an energy-focused initiative such as ESPC. So in terms of the kind of management or the structure of these projects, there are really two models in which these are implemented and developed. So the first one that we're showing here shows a municipality directly engaging in ESCO, or Energy Services Company. And so ESCO, again, standing for Energy Services Company, these are companies that are specifically in this field. They're focused on these types of projects, again, knowing that they're different from traditional capital projects in terms of the guarantee of savings and performance. There are certain requirements for companies to be eligible to do this type of work. And again, these are the ESCOs that perform this type of work. And so some examples include Honeywell, Johnson Controls, Energy Systems Group, Ameresco, just to name a few. There are several, but again, they're all companies that have the one technical expertise in terms of implementing a project like this with, again, the guarantee of performance, but also the financial backing to support the guarantee of energy savings, again, to make sure that you are whole should the energy savings not come to fruition. So when municipalities partner with an ESCO directly, they're responsible for issuing the RFP to engage the ESCO. They're responsible for vetting the proposals and the different ESCO teams. They're also responsible for monitoring the projects, overseeing the finances, and ensuring that the contractual obligations are met. And so it also in this model, as a result of the project, and really when we get into that process of measuring and verifying the energy savings, the ESCOs are the ones that self-report the energy savings and are really the sole determinant of whether or not the project was a success. With that, this Model 2 here introduces an owner's representative to manage the ESCO. And so the owner's representative acts on behalf of the municipality and helps to protect its interests throughout the entire process. So it really is a layer of oversight on the ESCO rather than the municipality managing the process alone or the ESCO really self-managing the process in reality. In addition, the owner's rep also coordinates financial, legal, and technical review to ensure the project stays compliant and also aligns with municipal goals. In addition, the owner's rep role would also be to oversee energy savings calculations, the reporting, and the measurement verification process, again, which is critical to ensuring that the energy savings that you were guaranteed did come to fruition and that you met that savings goal at the end of the project. And so this added layer of oversight really creates more of a sense of accountability, more transparency, and confidence that, again, the guaranteed savings are being achieved, but also that the project that is being developed and implemented is aligned with your goals and with your needs. And so really we see this model and this structure as one that can reduce risk and again, deliver or ensure that the project delivers on the outcomes that are promised at the start of the process. So just to note here, Energia has been competitively selected for those of you that are CCM members by the Connecticut Conference of Municipalities, by CCM, to provide owner's representative services for these types of projects, for energy savings performance contracts. Again, because these projects involve multiple steps, multiple stakeholders, our partnership with CCM helps to provide guidance and oversight throughout the process for CCM members. Again, the role of an owner's rep is really just to make sure that the project is well structured, stayed on track, and delivers the energy savings, as well as, again, providing that energy and engineering oversight throughout all steps, including development and design. I think, again, this relationship and this support that we provide really helps to allow municipal staff to focus on their day-to-day responsibilities while still moving forward with this project. Again, it can certainly be involved, and having an owner's representative involved helps to alleviate that and ensure that you have somebody that's on your team to help make sure that the project is successful. So with all of that, I'd like to turn it over to Vin here to share some insight into the ESPC that we partnered with the Town and School District of Cheshire. With that, Vin.
Okay, thanks, Justin, and good morning again, everyone. So what I'm going to try and do in the next couple of slides is take everything Justin just said, which may be a little bit abstract, and show you how it worked in reality for us. So, we partnered with the town. We do have a very good relationship with the town manager, town council, the Energy Commission, the Sustainability Committee in town. If you're looking to do one of these projects, I certainly recommend that you partner with all those, not only town administrators and staff, but with the commissions and other elected bodies in town to make this successful. So in 2014, we set down this path to do an energy performance contract. When we went out to bid, I'm looking at that first portion of the slide that talks about project statistics. We did have 3 bids: Amoresco, Schneider Electric, and Con Ed at the time bid on our project. You'll see at the top there, the project size was $10.2 million between town and school buildings. About 80% of that was for school buildings. It shouldn't really be surprising if you think about the total square footage of a typical town schools versus town buildings. Of course, I'm happy that we did most of that for the schools because we did need to make some significant infrastructure improvements. The projected energy savings were $618,000 per year, and I'll come back to that on the next slide. And the reduction in energy cost is 24%. I know that Justin talked a lot about electricity savings, but the savings comes from electricity, reduction in oil or natural gas consumption if you're using that for heating or other things like cooking. And also, water usage was one of the components in this project back in 2014 that we did see some savings. What really attracted me to this energy performance contract back in 2014 was the need for infrastructure improvements that we had in our schools. And the first bullet that you'll see on the energy conservation measures is building-wide electric heat conversion. We had one school building was an elementary school, actually one of the largest in the state. It's called Highland Elementary School. It's about 106,000 square feet. It was built in 1971, and it was heated by electricity. Back in the 70s, if you're old enough to remember that, the cost of electricity was going to be practically free because of the advent of nuclear energy. That's since changed. By the time we got to the 90s, that was not very popular, and electricity costs had started going up. So we had this building that at the time was over 40 years old that we had been heating with electricity. We had in our capital budget for many years converting the electric heat to natural gas or some other heat source, but it never got approved. If you are part of a municipality, you know that town councils, if that's your form of government, always have a balancing act to determine what capital projects they can fund. And sometimes it's easier to just push projects out that are expensive. So for us, this was a way to do some significant infrastructure improvement projects. And again, that was what was particularly attractive to me as the chief operating officer for the schools. So in addition to Highland Elementary, we also had an addition to our high school, which was built in the 50s, that had an addition done in the 70s that was also electric heat. So as part of our $10.2 million project, we converted all that electric heat to natural gas. At Highland, again, in particular, 106,000 square feet, we were able to convert the electric heat to natural gas, and we were also able to add air conditioning throughout the building, which we did not have. And we were still saving money every year in this performance contract. So we're heating and cooling the building for our students and staff, which is an improvement in the education and the comfort of that building. So this is not just about money savings or reduction in your carbon footprint. There's also some improvements that you'll make to the quality of the buildings. LED lighting upgrades, that one I just wanted to touch on quickly here, because at the time, all of our buildings, classrooms, and hallways had fluorescent lights. The recommendation that we worked with from Amoresco was to make that fluorescent lighting more energy efficient by having more energy efficient fluorescent lighting. And going back to 2014, LEDs were not quite as popular as they are today, but we really worked hard with Amoresco, and we installed this computer-controlled LED lighting throughout our classrooms and hallways and on all our buildings. And not only did it save us the money that it was promised to, we actually saved a lot more in lighting, because what happened after we installed this LED lighting in the classrooms is that the teachers in particular said it's too bright. And that enabled us, because they're computer controlled, to reduce the amount of light output to about 50% of the lighting potential in the LEDs. And that saved us a lot more energy than we expected it to. So that was a really great improvement for us. Plus, that computer control system does things like motion sensing, so the lights will go off or dim depending on the setting if there's no motion. But the other thing it does is daylight harvesting. So if you have a classroom, on one side you have your windows and it's a sunny day, the LED fixtures on that side of the room automatically dim down. It's not noticeable to the students or staff, but that adds to the savings that you accumulate. And then the other thing about LED is we didn't have our maintenance staff constantly changing bulbs and ballast, and that is further savings, not to mention that We don't like sending our maintenance staff up on ladders because that's risk of injury and, reduces workman comp claims. LED lighting is good for about 50,000 hours. So, those LEDs will be here long after I retire, which is pretty soon, actually. And then I'm not going to get into the other conservation measures in detail, other than to say that we also did building management system additions to help manage some of the electricity and energy consumption. And the one thing Justin didn't touch on is when you look at a comprehensive project like we did, there are some savings and some improvements that you'll do that have very rapid paybacks. And building management systems are one of those. And so the advanced or the enhanced savings you get from those types of measures help to pay for the longer term energy improvements, which could include things like boiler replacements or window replacements. And, there's a lot of detail that we won't get into today, but, our contract was pretty comprehensive. The other thing that we have on this slide is Cheshire ESPC Phase 2 is currently in process. So we are working on a second energy performance contract. And the only difference really that I'll highlight between the one we did in 2014 and the one we're looking at today is there certainly are infrastructure improvements in terms of boiler upgrades and potential roof replacements. But we also have renewable energy. So we would do solar on several of our school buildings. We're looking at doing fuel cells at a wastewater treatment plant and at our high school to convert natural gas to electricity, which reduces our reliance on the electrical grid and potentially enables us to send some electricity back into the grid. And the other thing is that the funding for this is not just funds that we would borrow, but most projects are eligible for incentives. Our utility is Eversource. And there's still federal tax credits available under the Inflation Reduction Act for solar, contrary to popular belief. You could still get at those if you move relatively quickly. So with that, Justin, if you want to just kind of advance to the next slide where we have some of the savings. All right, so from that first slide, the guaranteed savings in that first year of the contract were $663,000. So if you look at the right side of the screen here, you'll see contract year one, $663,269. That third column is demonstrated savings. And so what I really like about today's presentation is, we're showing you the actual history of what was guaranteed every year and what did we actually save. So you'll see in that far right column, the excess savings every year, we've saved more than what was guaranteed. So the bottom line is Amoresco, who provided the guaranteed energy savings, has never written us a check. And so, certainly that's a good thing for Amoresco, but if you think about it, the town has about $315,000 of additional cash flow. So you don't do this because you're looking for the guaranteed energy savings. That's just expected. You'll hopefully exceed like we did. But even if we didn't exceed, even if we hit the guaranteed savings amount, we still made these infrastructure improvements to our buildings that have, long-term impacts, and we've become more sustainable, as a result from that contract, which is why we're looking to do the second one. So Justin, we'll stop talking now and give it back to you.
Thank you, Vin. Really valuable, again, your experience to speak there. Here we have a couple other examples of some energy savings performance contracts that we've been involved with. So the first one here is the City and School District of Waterbury, which at the time was one of the largest ESPCs ever completed in the state of Connecticut, and really encompassed, similar to, as Vin said, on the Town of Cheshire project, really included both municipal and school facilities to drive an extremely comprehensive project. So you can see here the total project size was about $26 million. And it was completed back in January of 2019. So same thing, we're several years into the energy savings guarantee period at this point. So at the time, again, annual energy savings were projected at approximately $1.6 million, which translated to about a 39, almost 40% reduction in energy costs across the city and school district portfolio. And so just to note, a major focus of the project and of the work was upgrading several critical systems that were past their useful life, including boilers. And you can see actually that boiler replacement measure that I note on the screen here actually included 31 boilers that were completely replaced with new high efficiency units and all of the kind of ancillary equipment that was required to upgrade in those boiler plants. So Waterbury's project, I think, is a good example of how some larger municipalities can kind of leverage this process and the ESPC model to make some deep infrastructure improvements and realize substantial savings, again, without having to go out for traditional capital funding methods. And so this was certainly aligned, and all the initiatives that were included in this project were aligned with strategic energy planning and sustainability goals, as well as, again, addressing deferred maintenance and improving the overall operations of the municipality here. A couple other measures, again, comprehensive LED lighting, both interior and exterior. Solar was included in this project as well. And we also had, again, the tremendous amount of boilers, the 31 units of boilers, as well as several chiller replacements. Again, so extremely comprehensive across all of the city facilities, as well as all of the school districts in Waterbury. Next here, we have the town and school district of Thomaston. So this was actually one of the first municipalities to engage in an energy savings performance contract in Connecticut. And so at the time, as I'm sure that some or many of you can relate, the town was facing aging building systems and, of course, the rising energy costs that really had them looking for alternative long-term solutions. And so through this project and through this process, we were able to implement a just under $3 million energy savings performance contract with over $225,000 in annual energy savings, which related to about a 27% reduction in their baseline energy costs. Again, all of these upgrades were completed with no upfront cost, and the project was entirely funded through the guaranteed energy savings, as well as the rebates and incentives that we were able to take advantage of through the project. You could see some of the energy conservation measures that were included, but really, again, they were focused on, of course, overall building and performance improvements to efficiency, reliability, and you can see some other measures like geothermal, again, the energy management system, the temperature control system upgrades that were included here. And I think, this example really just goes to show, between the city of Waterbury, the town and school district of Cheshire, and now the town and school district of Thomaston, there's a lot of different opportunities. The projects can range certainly in different sizes, but any municipality can explore this opportunity, again, whether it's a larger municipality or a smaller one. If you have needs, if you have, energy savings potential, you can embark on this initiative and really fund needed improvements that, again, help to drive long-term savings and long-term operational efficiency improvements. So, when speaking about this project and this process, I think, there's a few things that we would put out there as considerations for your municipality. I think firstly is, do you have deferred maintenance, and is there complex capital upgrades that are needed in your facilities? Certainly, I hope that I've expressed it well enough that these projects are extremely valuable in the types of upgrades and the major system replacements that can be included as part of them. Secondly, will those upgrades result in measurable energy savings? So are those upgrades related to energy? And I think, even more so than maybe people may think, the answer is often yes. Of course, you have lighting and temperature controls, HVAC systems that are all, related to energy and that kind of everyone I think thinks of commonly, as well as I'll throw renewable energy in there like solar. But interesting enough, there are also some other measures that you may not think of, like window replacements, doors, roofs, that all impact the energy efficiency of a building. And so there's a lot that can be included. And again, we look to identify as many energy savings opportunities, which in turn, again, allow us to fund some of the more complex, more expensive, frankly, capital upgrades that are needed within the buildings. And then finally, does the concept, the process itself seem attractive for your municipality in terms of a turnkey project with guaranteed savings and performance? Again, these projects are not just about the upgrades, but again, it's a guaranteed outcome that is really the key of these projects here, and certainly is backed by experience and many examples of successful projects that have been done across the state. So how can you get started in this process? I think the first step is always to identify what types of capital upgrades are needed and kind of how much energy savings can be projected from making some of those needed improvements. Certainly important to understand kind of the unique requirements in terms of Connecticut's energy savings performance contracting legislation. Certainly going back to what I had mentioned earlier, we always recommend engaging with an expert that has the experience, that has the expertise to help drive these projects and make sure, again, from the very beginning, that they are set up for success as a result of the project. And then certainly asking an owner's representative, Energia certainly does this type of work to perform a feasibility study, right? To identify what sort of scopes can be included relative to your needs, what types of saving opportunities do we see in terms of being able to drive savings and fund that needed improvement. So yeah, certainly again, having the right people in place is just as important as proceeding with the project and identifying what you would like to include. And so with that, want to thank everyone again for being here, Vin for co-presenting, Sustainable CT for helping to organize and inviting us to be a part of this. Before we wrap, and we do want to leave a couple minutes here for some Q&A, I'm going to pass it over to Jess from Sustainable CT to kind of close us out and lead us into the Q&A portion.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Justin and Vin. That was really informative, and there are just so many opportunities with this energy savings performance contract program. And I'm seeing lots of overlap with our actions. So it's really the outcomes of the projects. You're going to be benchmarking your energy use. You're going to be saving energy, increasing possibly the use of renewables, saving water. There's lots of overlap within many of our actions in the program. So it is an exciting opportunity for towns. We do have quite a few questions in the chat, and we've got about 14 minutes left, so I'm just going to get right to it. So our first question, who estimates the size of the energy savings and how do they do that?
Sure. So I maybe alluded to this a little bit just towards the end of the presentation, but Energia as an owner's representative, the first step that we always take when speaking with or engaging with a municipality is to do just that, to estimate what we think is the energy savings potential, what types of scope of work we think could fit into the project. Certainly, if there's interest in solar or renewables, we do analysis on that as well. So in terms of an initial estimate, that would be the first step. It would be an owner's representative performing that assessment. Later on, certainly again, once in ESCO, the energy services company is engaged, those estimates now become real numbers. And again, those are what's tied to the guarantee in the project. But again, first step estimate would be an owner's representative such as Energia.
Yeah, if I could just add one thing to that. So in this second energy performance contract, there were a few priorities that we had. So when we engaged with Energia, we pointed out that one of our schools in particular, Doolittle Elementary School, We're in the process of building 2 new schools. That Doolittle School would be the only school that then would not have air conditioning, that wouldn't have window replacements, and it needed a new roof. So we made those priorities in this review of our second energy performance contract. And so, towns and schools do have that ability to prioritize what they'd like to see done, even if they're higher cost measures that don't have as much energy efficiency. You work with the owner's rep and your ESCO to focus on those projects that you'd like to see done under the contract.
Thanks, Vin. So Justin, what are the typical fees for the owner's rep service, and how long does it typically extend the savings ROI, return on investment?
Sure. So in terms of the fees, so I'd say first off, similar to maybe more of a traditional capital project, and I'll speak to Energia specifically. In part, Energia's role is similar to that of your architect or engineer for a traditional capital project. So we serve in that engineering capacity. But in addition to that, we also, again, are involved in the initial steps of the process as well, performing that feasibility study, identifying the energy savings potential, and then helping you select an ESCO and develop the project, oversee construction, and then the measurement and verification process. So our fee is more involved, I'll say, than a traditional architect on a capital project. That being said, our fee would be a fairly small portion of the overall project, frankly. Again, in line with or less than that of what you might expect to see from an architect on a traditional capital project. Again, even though our services extend beyond what they would typically offer. In terms of the ROI, again, the project, and just to note this as well, all of the fees, all of the costs associated with the project would be rolled up into kind of the turnkey implementation costs of the project. And so at no point is there any out-of-pocket cost, whether it be for the ESCO and any of their services once they're engaged, or Energia and any of our services. We work at risk. We help you to engage the ESCO, and it's only until or unless you sign a contract with that ESCO to actually have the guaranteed savings, the fixed scope to be implemented, that you would have any obligation to move forward with the project. So I don't know if that exactly answers your question. It is site specific. It's something that we can kind of talk about a little bit more, but again, frankly, it's a fairly low percentage of the overall project, and it is entirely encompassed by the overall energy savings, just as any of the other costs of the project are as well. At least that's Energia's model and how we manage these projects.
Thanks, Justin. Please, Vin.
Vin?
So the way this actually works, for those of you who are on the town or on the school side, you're going to go to your board or your town council and say, we can hire this company that will come in, do an energy review, make a series of recommendations on the energy improvements that can be made and how much we'll save and the number of years it'll take us to pay back. And then your board and council is going to ask, well, how much is this going to cost now? And the answer is zero, because until the work is completed by Energia, until an ESCO bids on the project, and until the town or schools agree to actually go forward, there is no out-of-pocket cost. And then if you do go forward, everything is rolled into the cost of the energy performance contract that's paid over 15 years, if that's the term of your deal. So it becomes a lot more saleable when you're trying to take this to the next step, from my point of view, again, as the COO for the schools at the time, and currently in my current role.
Thank you both. So our next question is premised not to get too technical, but we all know that time of use electric rates will be mandatory in Connecticut, and this person thinks 2028 at the latest. Are bids already considering this eventuality?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say yes and no. A lot of the measures that we spoke about a little bit for the few project examples that we gave will help to offset your overall energy usage. They will help to offset your overall demand. So in a sense, yes, right? They will help with time of use rates and higher rates during peak hours and demand, things like that. There are technologies that we are seeing. I'll give batteries as an example. Certainly, solar is very popular. There's others, cogeneration, fuel cells, etc. I would say they're a little bit less common, although to Vince's point, fuel cell is proposed for the phase two of our current EPC with Cheshire. Um, I think to your point, though, once those rates are more prevalent, once we're kind of seeing more of the impact of time of use rates, the economics of those kind of systems will improve. So batteries, for example, I think is a great example where you can, especially tie it with solar, offset that energy to a battery and then draw from that battery during peak demand periods. It's not something that we're kind of addressing directly so much today, but through some of the equipment that we're seeing, we are seeing, the effects of that. And I can certainly see how once that's kind of mandatory and widespread throughout the state, it'll become even more of a kind of economical decision to be made there.
Thanks, Justin. So this next question is for you, Vin. What levels of savings have been seen to date, and has Ameresco had to come back to complete work to achieve the estimated energy and cost savings?
No, as I presented in that slide, we've exceeded the guaranteed savings every year. So Ameresco didn't have to come back and do any work specific to that. Certainly there were some adjustments that had to be made to certain components as time went on, but it didn't affect the savings that we've seen. And I hope that answers the question.
Thank you. Another question. Given the push for building electrification and renewable energy integration, are renewable energy systems considered a priority?
Uh, yeah, I would say it's really at the discretion of your municipality, your stakeholders, your community, right? They can be a great way to drive energy savings. As Vin mentioned, there are some state and federal rebates and incentive programs available for renewable energy. And so it can certainly be a big driver to help you fund additional needed improvements. But not every one of our projects includes solar or renewable energy components. Sometimes it's just not the priority. Sometimes the timing isn't right, whatever it may be. So from my perspective, I would say, yes, it's a great thing to include. It's certainly not something that has to be included in the project. But if there's interest, we would love to kind of help you explore that more.
Yeah, I agree with what Justin just said. Although we're looking at solar now in particular, it's just more financially attractive because of the Inflation Reduction Act has those tax credits available, and so it helps the overall payback of the project. I know there are a lot of towns and cities and school districts that are very concerned about their carbon footprint and renewable energy sources, and that is certainly one reason that a town would do it over, maybe a different town.
Then that gets right to our next question, and maybe answering for Cheshire. In addition to energy savings, efficiency costs, are there any measurements on clean energy, carbon footprint, energy use intensity, Energy Star scores, or any other factors, aspirations for the town?
You know what? I'm sorry. You just got cut off there because a phone call was coming.
Oh, no problem. No worries.
Repeat the question.
Main drivers, Vince, for participating in this: saving money, reducing GHG emissions, other.
Yeah. So when we did our contract back in 2014, from my perspective, it was clearly to make infrastructure improvements that we weren't, and hadn't funded within our capital budget structure. And so this was a way to complete those infrastructure improvement projects a lot faster than they would have been done. As I talked about the electric heat, at Highland and our high school, I'm not sure we would have had those projects done even today had it not been for this particular structure. So for me, it was infrastructure improvements, but then the savings that we were able to achieve, were certainly, and being able to pay for those through the energy savings, the financial piece was number two, for us. This new project is a little bit different because we are able to get to some of the renewable energy like solar that I mentioned, and Reducing our electricity costs through the fuel cells is very attractive, in particular at the wastewater treatment plant here in Cheshire, which uses a lot of oil. So this would be a way to reduce, our oil dependency.
Thank you. So I don't want to put you both on the spot, but do you have 5 minutes more to go through a couple more questions?
I do.
I do, yeah, certainly.
Okay. So folks on the line, we do have a lot of great questions in the chat, and I think this is a fabulous opportunity to go discuss this issue. So we will stay on the line, but if you have to run, please know this is being recorded. We will send the recording. We will send the slide deck out to you so you can catch up on anything you missed. And I want to thank everyone for joining us today. This has been a very informative discussion. So our next question, can you both comment on the net zero energy public building model? It's the understanding of this individual that it applies to both new buildings and existing buildings.
Sure.
Well, Justin, I'll let you lead on that because you're more technically savvy on that question.
Sure. In terms of net zero, I mean, we're certainly seeing an interest of that, and even going back to kind of the previous question, a lot of municipalities, a lot of communities, their priority for these projects is to drive greenhouse gas emission reduction or to improve their carbon footprint, right? So I don't want to miss that point of it either, right? There's obviously a lot of great upgrades that can be done, energy savings to be driven, but the environmental component is certainly something that we're always conscious of as well. In terms of, again, going back to net zero, again, we've seen a lot of interest or desire for buildings or communities, districts to kind of achieve that label. It is, I'll say, a little bit different when you're thinking in terms of new construction versus existing buildings, right? Because when you have existing buildings, you're a little bit more limited in terms of what improvements can be made, right? A lot of times you're looking at retrofitting existing systems. Even, in the case of Highland Elementary, as Vin mentioned, for example, we were able to convert from, electricity to natural gas. Now maybe people are looking to go the opposite way, right? So there are a lot, I'll say, in terms of these projects that can get you close to that goal. I would say the biggest piece would most likely be the renewable energy component, right? You would firstly want to try to have an all-electric building. We've done several of these projects that do just that, right? That convert building, whether it's fuel oil or natural gas to complete electric heating and cooling. And then you can implement renewable energy such as solar to then offset what that electric use is. I think that's probably the approach that you would want to look at, especially in the confines of this project. New construction, though, as I mentioned, is really the best time to do that because you're able to design a building to be net zero up front, implement the energy efficient systems from that initial construction piece. But there's a lot to be done. I guess I'll close with that in terms of energy savings performance contracting and getting you at least closer to that goal of net zero.
Yeah, I'll add to that. So as I mentioned, we are building 2 new schools here in Cheshire right now. They'll be open in September of this year. They are both elementary schools, roughly 100,000 square feet each. I don't believe the requirement in Connecticut is to get to net zero. I think the standard is high performance building standards. However, with the 2 new school projects, we've done a couple of things. One is they have geothermal systems for heating and cooling. So each building has between 50 and 60 geothermal wells that have been drilled. The other thing that the school building committee provided for was solar. Even though we didn't have enough in our approved referendum and budget to add solar panels, all the infrastructure for solar panels for our roof systems is in place in both of those school buildings. Just interestingly, not to take too much time on this question, but we did engage with Energia to do the solar arrays on those 2 new schools as part of this second energy performance contract we're working on. So we're hoping to get the solar installed as part of this energy performance contract because it didn't fit in the original school's budget. with the addition of that solar, we'll be pretty close to net zero on both buildings. And certainly that would be something that we'd like to do. And we hope to get there with this second project that we're working on.
That's amazing. So, to your knowledge, what other towns and cities outside of Waterbury, Thomaston, and Cheshire have used this process in the state? And how often can communities apply to go through it?
Sure. Just to name a few others that Energia was involved in, we had the Town and School District of Southington, Town and School District of Guilford, Brantford, Seymour, East Haven, just to name a few off the top of my head. I do know, just to maybe note this concept, the legislation authorizing energy savings performance contracting in Connecticut has been around for a very long time. And so it's not something that's new. It is something that a lot of municipalities, even more state agencies have performed and supported in the past. So again, just to name a few that Energy has been involved with there, but there have been many more as well that have done this type of project in the state. The second part of your question as well, how often can towns and cities apply? So it's not so much an application, right? The development and the process for this project is a little bit similar in a certain sense to a traditional capital project, right? Engaging a contractor to implement these improvements. Really, I would say what the limiting factor is, so to speak, as far as how often you can do these projects, is having the energy savings to make it worthwhile for you, essentially, right? If we can find enough energy savings and enough potential to fund needed facility improvements, then you can do these as frequently as you like, frankly. It's all about, looking at the financial model. Can we drive energy savings? Are those energy savings enough to fund needed improvements? If so, you can move forward with the project. There's nothing stopping you, or there's no set time frame that you have to wait between implementing these projects.
Thank you so much, Justin. There are so many more questions in the chat, and I don't want to go too far over, but here's just one more maybe. Will an ESCO that has proprietary building systems listen to their client and provide other open systems that do not require their service and contracts in the future?
Yes, that is a great question, and I thank you for bringing it up. So absolutely, one of the benefits that I maybe danced around a little bit, I didn't say too explicitly in these projects, is that you have a lot more insight and input when it comes to everything to do with the project in terms of the ESCO selection first and foremost, but then the subcontractor selection, the vendor and manufacturer of the equipment that you're looking to install. Again, I did mention briefly that the ESCO that you would ultimately engage through an RFP process, they are the ones that you have a direct single source contract with. They're the ones that are responsible for implementation of all the improvements and guarantee of the savings. Through that, they're responsible for securing the subcontractors. Again, they're responsible for procurement of the equipment. And so having that single source contract with the ESCO allows you to direct them towards what you want included in the project in terms of just the types of improvements, but also in the vendors, the manufacturers, the subcontractors that are selected as part of that process. They're not subject to the same low bid requirements that you would be on a traditional capital project. So yes, you absolutely can have input into that. I'll give you an example. We've had one company that is a controls manufacturer install one of their competitors, BMS systems, for example, right? Or same thing with HVAC manufacturers. So absolutely, you have the guidance there. You have the input and the ability to direct towards what you want to see installed as part of the project.
Yeah, I can vouch for that because our ESCO right now that we're working with is Johnson Controls, and our facilities director was pretty specific about not wanting to change certain of the controls, and there wasn't even a question. They'll just follow the lead of the school district. What I like about that question too is it speaks a little bit about the expertise that you have within, your town or your schools. If you have that expertise and you can, set some of the standards that you want, but if you don't have the expertise, between Energia and, whatever ESCO that you select, some very qualified ESCOs out there, the town and the schools will get what they need.
I lied. We're going to do one more question. So let's just say somebody's excited about what they heard on the webinar today. They want to take the next step. What do they do?
Sure. So the first step that I would always recommend again is to engage an owner's representative and have them perform a feasibility study. Again, it will allow you to get kind of at least a rough idea of what your buildings are using and spending in terms of energy, what your energy efficiency rating is, and translate that into what types of opportunities are there that can be funded by energy savings and how much energy savings could be generated. So again, Energia being a CCM approved partner, you can certainly reach out to me. I have my contact information at the end of the slide deck there. Be happy to meet with you and speak with you about that opportunity and help to implement the feasibility study. Again, in engaging Energia, there's no upfront cost, there's no obligation. So we would perform that feasibility study, on your behalf. Really, again, just as kind of that first exploratory step to see what type of opportunity is present. And then go from there, discuss next steps and see how we can turn that opportunity into a real project that garners that success that you're looking for.
What about you, Vin? You've lived this life. What do they do?
Well, what I did for the second performance contract kind of echoes what Justin said. I contacted Energia, and I knew that they had the CCM pre-bid contract, and kind of got started on it pretty quickly. So I will add, if anybody has any questions about the Cheshire projects, you could certainly feel free to reach out to me too. But if you want to get started, I certainly recommend that if you're a CCM member, take advantage of the offer. Cost you no out of pocket to explore it and have a conversation and see if it makes sense, for your community.
Great. Well, thank you both so much. That was a fabulous presentation. I learned a lot. I think folks on the line learned a lot. Again, we will send out information in the next day or two, so stay tuned for that. And if you have questions, both Justin and Vince are available to connect. So thank you all for joining, for staying on a little bit extra, and I hope everyone has a wonderful rest of the day.
Absolutely.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Take care.